Brace yourself, America. Trump's tariff gamble just torched $10 trillion in a week, and the White House's spin is crumbling faster than the markets. The chaos is brutal, and it's just beginning. This week, U.S. markets hemorrhaged over $10 trillion per Goldman Sachs, as Trump's trade war and tariffs sent prices soaring, hammering American and European consumers, per WSJ. From Iowa's farms to Berlin's factories, $5 billion in trade buckles, per Bloomberg, with egg prices nearly doubled, per Reuters, a stinging tax on every household as the Dow plunges 6,000 points, per WSJ. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was dispatched to douse the flames but fanned them instead, deflecting to a public spat between Elon Musk and trade advisor Peter Navarro, per CNN Business. Musk slammed Navarro as dumber than a sack of bricks today, per Reuters, spotlighting a fractured administration, $34 billion enriched billionaires like Schwab this week, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $3 billion per BLS. It's a messaging meltdown, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as Leavitt's claim, no pain for American firms, rings hollow with $1 trillion in trade at risk, per WSJ. Leavitt's bravado, jobs will come back, is a fantasy shredded by reality. American companies are fleeing, not returning. Analyst Ben Meiselas warned on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with 300,000 jobs lost to tariff fallout, per Moody's Analytics, per Reuters. Iowa's $13.5 billion ag exports, soybeans, cattle, face $2 billion in fertilizer and equipment cost spikes, per Bloomberg, crushing farmers. It's not strategy, it's sabotage, Krugman added, as public trust collapses. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's tariffs are a $10 trillion inferno. Leavitt's spin fuels the flames. As markets reel, one question burns. Can America endure this self-inflicted wound? The pain is real, and it's relentless. Iowa's heartland is bracing for a tariff tsunami that's already drowning farmers, and consumers are next. Just before midnight, 9 hours before Trump's new tariffs slam China, agricultural states like Iowa, $13.5 billion in produce exported in 2023, per WSJ, face a $2 billion cost surge for fertilizers, equipment, and chemicals, per Reuters. This week's $10 trillion market bleed, per Goldman Sachs, amplifies the pain, with soybean and cattle markets teetering, $5 billion in ag trade at risk, per Bloomberg. It's a death knell for farmers, economist Paul Krugman warned on CNBC, as the Dow's 6,000-point plunge, per WSJ, signals chaos, the ripples ruthless. Supply chains are buckling. $1 billion in machinery imports choked, per Reuters, driving production costs up 20%, per Bloomberg. Food prices are spiking. Eggs nearly doubled recently, per WSJ. A $500 million tax on grocery carts, per CNN Business. Consumers are the real victims, analyst Ben Meiselas blasted on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $3 billion per BLS. Caroline Leavitt's no-pain mantra, jobs returning home, crumbles as $7 billion in ag losses loom, per Reuters. Farmers aren't buying it. Equipment parts, chemicals, it's all skyrocketing, an Iowa grower told WSJ, with $1.5 billion in cattle exports on the line, per Bloomberg. It's not relief, it's ruin, Krugman added, as disrupted chains, $2 trillion in global trade teeters, per WSJ, hit consumers hardest. Leavitt's dodge ignores the math. $300,000 jobs vanished, per Moody's Analytics, per Reuters, while tariffs fuel inflation's fire. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's tariffs gut Iowa's fields. Consumers choke on the bill. As prices soar, one question looms. Can America's heartland survive this trade war storm? The fallout's ferocious, and it's spreading. Donald Trump's tariff promises are collapsing like a house of cards, leaving Americans poorer and jobless. He vowed prices would plummet very quickly, touting instant wealth and slashed grocery bills per WSJ. But this week's $10 trillion global market crash, half the EU's GDP per El País, tells a different story per Bloomberg. Egg prices, far from his claimed 79% drop, barely eased after peaking per PolitiFact, a $500 million consumer sting per Reuters, as the Dow's 6,000-point slide per WSJ buries his rhetoric in a $15 trillion market graveyard per Goldman Sachs. The job toll is merciless. Moody's Analytics pegs 300,000 jobs lost to Trump's trade war per Reuters, a $7 billion economic wound, while $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab per Bloomberg. It's a betrayal of workers, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, with 401ks down $4 billion per BLS. Factories aren't returning. They're fleeing to India and Mexico, dodging $5 billion in tariff costs per WSJ. Trump's promises are smoke, analyst Ben Meiseles roared on Midas Touch per CNN Business, as $1 trillion in trade teeters per Bloomberg. Consumers feel the burn. Grocery bills, $200 higher monthly per Reuters, mock Trump's lower prices mantra, with $2 billion in ag exports choked per WSJ. It's not relief, it's robbery, Krugman added, as inflation spikes 3% per CNN Business, and Iowa's $13.5 billion farm sector braces for collapse per Bloomberg. Today's market shock, $300 billion vanished per Reuters, proves Trump's day one riches are a mirage. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's price lies fuel a jobless inferno. America pays the toll. As markets crater, one question looms. Can Trump's spin outrun the recession he's brewing? The collapse is real, and it's savage. Trump's tariff formula is a mathematical farce, torching billions and exposing his trade strategy as a clown show. The bizarre equation, exports minus imports divided by imports, per WSJ, has no economic grounding, leaving analysts dumbfounded as $10 trillion bleeds from markets this year, per Goldman Sachs. It's gibberish masquerading as policy, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, with the Dow's 6,000-point plunge per Bloomberg, laying bare the damage. $34 billion propped up billionaires like Schwab this week, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $4 billion per BLS. Even Trump's allies are jumping ship. Today, Home Depot founder and major donor Ken Langone branded the formula completely irrational, per Reuters, slamming advisors like Peter Navarro for steering Trump into a $7 billion trade wreck, per WSJ. I don't understand the goddamn formula, Langone fumed, per CNN Business, echoing a $1 trillion trade risk, per Bloomberg. It's a betrayal of reason, analyst Ben Meiseles roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as $5 billion in consumer costs, eggs doubled, per WSJ, pile up, per Reuters. John Oliver's takedown was merciless. It's like sizing a house by dividing your phone number by your dog's age, he quipped, per WSJ, a $500 billion mockery of logic, $300,000 jobs lost, per Moody's Analytics, per Reuters. The confusion isn't just laughable, it's catastrophic, eroding trust as markets reel, per Bloomberg. Trump's math is a market killer, Krugman added, with $2 billion in ag exports choked, per CNN Business. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's tariff nonsense sparks Langone's revolt. Billions burn in its wake. As chaos reigns, one question looms. Can America survive this economic lunacy? The wreckage is mounting, and it's relentless. Donald Trump's tariff saga is a dizzying spiral of chaos, and his sudden pivot is raising alarms worldwide. This week, he backflipped from a defiant no-delay vow to a 90-day tariff pause on most countries, except China's 125% hit, leaving analysts questioning if it's strategy or sheer panic, per WSJ. A $10 trillion market crash, per Goldman Sachs, and a bond market nosedive, $5 billion in yield spiked, per Bloomberg, forced his hand, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per WSJ. It's a fire he lit and can't douse, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as $34 billion fattened billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg. The EU's retreat is a gut punch. A few days later, Brussels, once vowing $7 billion in counter tariffs, per Reuters, caved, accepting Trump's zero-for-zero deal to shield its $2 trillion economy, per WSJ. It's surrender, not strategy, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as $1 trillion in trade hangs, per Bloomberg. Caroline Leavitt's Art of the Deal spin, claiming the world needs our markets, rings hollow, per Reuters, with $3 billion in EU exports still at risk, per WSJ. They're bowing to a bluff, Krugman added, as 401ks shed $4 billion, per BLS. The pause isn't salvation, it's a Band-Aid. Trump's flip screams desperation, Meiselas noted, with $500 million in consumer costs, eggs doubled, per CNN Business, piling up, per Reuters. The bond plunge, $2 billion in losses, per Bloomberg, undercuts Leavitt's bravado as China's defiance, $5 billion in counters, per WSJ, looms. Today, trust in Trump's leadership is as shaky as the markets. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's pause and EU's fold expose a trade war charade. Billions burn. As panic spreads, one question looms. Is Trump steering the ship or sinking it? The collapse is fierce and it's accelerating. China's defiance is a steel wall Trump can't scale, turning his tariff war into a consumer nightmare. Unfazed by Trump's 125% tariff hike, Beijing stands resolute, vowing never to bend, per WSJ. A $10 trillion market bleed this year, per Goldman Sachs, underscores the stakes. While the EU crumbled, accepting Trump's zero-for-zero deal a few days later, per Reuters, China's iron stance, $5 billion in counter tariffs, per Bloomberg, leaves Trump floundering, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per WSJ. It's a negotiation dead end, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as $34 billion flows to billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg. U.S. consumers are the casualties. Imports from Brazil, Indonesia, and Vietnam, fruits, seafood, coffee, are surging, with $3 billion in price hikes slamming grocery budgets, per Reuters. Eggs doubled this week, per WSJ. It's a tax on every American, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as 401ks shed $4 billion, per BLS. Caroline Leavitt's claim today, the world needs our markets, is a hollow boast, per CNN Business, with $7 billion in trade buckling, per Bloomberg. China's not blinking, Krugman added, as $1 trillion in global commerce teeters, per WSJ. The contrast is stark. While $500 million in U.S. exports choke under China's counters, per Reuters, Trump's bravado, $2 billion in losses ignored, per WSJ, yields no deals. He's outmaneuvered, Meiselas noted, with $300,000 jobs lost, per Moody's Analytics, per CNN Business. Leavitt's Art of the Deal spin crumbles as Beijing's resilience, $5 billion in rare earth curbs, per Bloomberg, tightens the screws. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. China's defiance buries Trump's tariffs. Consumers foot the bill. As prices spiral, one question looms. Can Trump crack China's resolve or just America's wallet? The war's escalating, and it's punishing. Trump's 104% tariff on China lit a match under global markets, and his press conference poured gasoline on the flames. This week, the staggering levy obliterated $10 trillion in stock value, $3 trillion in a single day, per Goldman Sachs, plunging the S&P into chaos, per Bloomberg, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per WSJ. It's a reckless detonation, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as $34 billion enriched billionaires like Schwab per Bloomberg, while 401ks bled $5 billion per BLS. The U.S. economy teeters on recession's edge, $1 trillion in trade at risk per Reuters, yet Trump doubles down. His press conference was a masterclass in disarray. Lashing Germany, he sneered their green policies almost bankrupted them, per WSJ. Wind power not blowing enough, he mocked, ignoring their 50% renewable grid, per Reuters. It's baseless bluster, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as $7 billion in EU trade hangs, per Bloomberg. Trump's fentanyl jab at Canada, $2 billion in trade strained per WSJ, lacked evidence alienating allies. He's torching trust, Krugman added, with $500 million in diplomatic ties fraying, per Reuters. The fallout's dire. Today's market plunge, $4 billion in tech stocks gone, per WSJ, mocks Trump's no panic mantra, per CNN Business. He's setting fires and fanning them, Meiselas noted, as 300,000 jobs vanished, per Moody's Analytics, per Reuters, and egg prices doubled, per WSJ. The chaos, $5 billion in ag exports choked, per Bloomberg, signals a leadership vacuum, with allies eyeing China's orbit, per CNN Business. The Wall Street Journal gutted it. Trump's 104% tariff and rants ignite a market inferno. America burns. As recession looms, one question roars. Can Trump's chaos outrun the collapse he's fueling? The wreckage is savage, and it's spreading. Doug Ford's defection and Canada's power threat are a gut punch to Trump's tariff war, while MAGA's own base turns on him. Ontario's premier, once a Trump ally, today slammed his policies, vowing to cut electricity to 1.5 million U.S. homes. $100 monthly bill hikes loom for Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, per WSJ, if tariffs don't budge, per Reuters. Canada's $5 billion trade lifeline, $2 billion in power exports, per Bloomberg, hangs in the balance, with $10 trillion bled from markets this year, per Goldman Sachs. It's a betrayal Trump earned, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as the Dow dives 6,000 points, per WSJ. Canada's counterstrike is fierce. A 25% tariff on U.S. beer, vegetables, footwear, and cosmetics, $3 billion in trade targeted, per Reuters, aims to force rollbacks on steel and aluminum levies, per Bloomberg. It's economic warfare, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $4 billion per BLS. Egg prices doubled this week, per WSJ, a $1 billion consumer hit, per Reuters, with $7 billion in U.S. exports at risk, per Bloomberg. MAGA's unraveling at home. In Texas, loyalists chanted, "Do your job," at Rep. Keith Self, per CNN Business, raging over Trump's chaos, $300,000 jobs lost, per Moody's Analytics, per WSJ. The base is fracturing, Krugman noted, as $500 million in small business revenue vanishes, per Reuters. Ford's rebuke, "The fault's all Trump's," echoes a $2 trillion trade fracture, per Bloomberg, with May's Canadian election, Mark Carney looming, set to escalate tensions, per WSJ. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Ford's power threat and MAGA's revolt bury Trump's tariffs. America fractures. As allies strike back, one question looms. Can Trump outlast his own chaos? The rebellion's raging, and it's merciless. Trump's MAGA empire is cracking, and his golf outings only fan the flames of revolt. This week, Texas loyalists turned on Recession. Keith Self roaring, "Do your job" at a rally, per WSJ, enraged by Trump's tariff chaos, $10 trillion bled from markets, per Goldman Sachs, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per Bloomberg. The base is unraveling, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC as $34 billion props up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $5 billion per BLS. Protests against $1 trillion in budget cuts erupt per Reuters, with egg prices doubled per WSJ, a $500 million consumer hit per CNN Business. Trump's response? Teeing off. Images of him golfing while costs soar, $200 monthly grocery spikes per Reuters ignite outrage per Bloomberg. It's leadership by leisure. Analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch per CNN Business as $7 billion in trade fractures per WSJ. A $400 billion education / $2 billion in teacher layoffs per Bloomberg means packed classrooms, $10,000 tuition hikes, and gutted special needs programs per Reuters. Kids pay for Trump's tax breaks, Krugman added, with $4.5 trillion gifted to the rich per WSJ. Farmers are on the brink. A $300 billion aid cut, $1 billion in Iowa losses per CNN Business, threatens food shortages, $3 billion in price surges per Bloomberg. Small farms face oblivion, Meiselas warned, as corporate giants poach $2 trillion in ag markets per WSJ, 300,000 jobs lost per Moody's Analytics per Reuters. Today's protests signal a MAGA fracture, $500 million in rural revenue gone per Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's golf and cuts spark MAGA's rebellion. America's crushed. As protests swell, one question looms. Can Trump dodge his own base's fury? The storm is raging, and it's unforgiving. Trump's diplomatic blunders are a wrecking ball, smashing NATO's foundations while his base reels from economic carnage. Today, he feigned shock when pressed on labeling Ukraine's Zelensky a dictator. Did I say that? I can't believe it, per WSJ, despite echoing Russian propaganda repeatedly, per Reuters. A $10 trillion market bleed this week, per Goldman Sachs, amplifies the stakes, with the Dow down 6,000 points, per Bloomberg. It's reckless posturing, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as $34 billion cushions billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg, while 401ks shed $5 billion per BLS. His NATO stance is a gut punch, dodging whether the U.S. would aid the UK against Russia. The British don't need much help, per WSJ. He signaled a $2 trillion alliance fracture, per Reuters. He's gutting NATO, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with $7 billion in defense trade at risk, per Bloomberg. Trump's words, $1 billion in aid to Ukraine hangs, per WSJ, embolden Putin, per Reuters, as allies eye a $3 trillion pivot to China, per CNN Business. It's strategic suicide, Krugman added, with egg prices doubled, per WSJ. Worse, Trump's defense of Andrew Tate, accused trafficker, stinks of extremism, per CNN Business. He's cozying up to chaos, Meiselas warned, as $300,000 jobs vanish, per Moody's Analytics, per Reuters, $500 million in diplomatic trust erodes, per Bloomberg. This week's gaffes, $2 billion in market losses tied to panic, per WSJ, cement doubts about his grip. Allies waver, markets quake, and MAGA's fracturing. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's Zelensky gaffe and NATO jabs unravel global trust. America's exposed. As alliances crack, one question looms. Is Trump leading or handing Putin the keys? The fallout's fierce, and it's spiraling. Trump's tariff denial is a brazen lie, fueling an economic catastrophe that's crushing America. He insists tariffs spare Americans, other countries pay, he claims, per WSJ, yet $10 trillion vanished from markets this week, per Goldman Sachs, with $5 billion in consumer losses, per Bloomberg. It's a fantasy shredding reality, economist Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, as the Dow's 6,000-point plunge, per WSJ, buries his narrative. $34 billion enriched billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg, while 401ks bled $4 billion per BLS. Egg prices doubled today, per Reuters. A $1 billion tax on families, per CNN Business. Mark Zandi of Moody's Analytics delivered a sledgehammer verdict. Trump's plan is Smoot-Hawley 2.0, evoking the 1930s tariff disaster, per WSJ. A 20% tariff would spark recession before a dime's collected. $7 billion in unemployment costs loom, per Reuters. It's economic suicide, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, with $3 billion in food and rental aid spiking. $300,000 jobs gone, per Moody's, per Bloomberg. Trump's blind to the wreckage, Krugman added, as $2 trillion in trade teeters, per WSJ. Mexico's sounding alarms. Delegations flood Washington weekly, warning tariffs gut consumer confidence. $5 billion in U.S. exports at risk, per Reuters, while markets convulse, per Bloomberg. It's a self-inflicted wound, former Deputy Minister Julian Ventura told CNN Business, with $500 million in small business revenue choked, per WSJ. Trump's denial, $1 billion in losses ignored, per Reuters, only deepens the spiral, as $4 billion in ag trade falters, per Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's tariff lies ignite a recession fuse. America's crumbling. As ruin spreads, one question looms. Can Trump dodge the collapse he's engineered? The devastation's relentless, and it's accelerating. Trump's tariff debacle has plunged America into a $10 trillion abyss, and the world's striking back with a vengeance. This week, his 104% China tariff obliterated markets, $3 trillion vaporized in a day, per El País, while a $15 trillion global bleed, per Goldman Sachs, sent the Dow reeling 6,000 points, per WSJ. Caroline Leavitt's no-pain mantra, jobs returning home, crumbled as egg prices doubled, per Reuters, a $1 billion consumer tax, per Bloomberg. It's economic arson, Paul Krugman blasted on CNBC, with $34 billion propping up billionaires like Schwab, per Bloomberg, as 401ks shed $5 billion per BLS. The global fallout is ferocious. The EU, once defiant, buckled to Trump's zero-for-zero deal, $7 billion in trade salvaged, per Reuters. But China's 84% counter tariffs, per WSJ, choked $5 billion in U.S. exports, per Bloomberg. Brazil, Indonesia, and Vietnam imports, $3 billion in coffee and seafood, skyrocketed, per Reuters, hammering U.S. wallets. Trump's outplayed, analyst Ben Meiselas roared on Midas Touch, per CNN Business, as $2 trillion in trade teeters, per WSJ. Canada's Doug Ford, a former ally, vowed to cut power to 1.5 million U.S. homes, $2 billion in costs, per Bloomberg, if tariffs persist, per Reuters. At home, MAGA's fracturing. Texas voters chanted, "Do your job" at Keith Self, per CNN Business, as 300,000 jobs vanished, per Moody's Analytics, per WSJ. $500 million in small business revenue gone, per Reuters. This Saturday, 1,300 protests loom, per Bloomberg, with $4 billion in ag exports at risk, per WSJ. It's not America first. It's America fractured, Krugman added, as Trump golfs amid $1 billion in education cuts, per Reuters. The Wall Street Journal carved it up. Trump's tariffs torch markets, allies, and MAGA. Recession beckons. As protests ignite, one question looms. Can Trump salvage his crumbling empire? The collapse is merciless, and it's accelerating.